Vengeance is mine.
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with a review of Black Phone 2, the sequel to the 2022 horror hit, The Black Phone. By the way, as a little tangent here, how much time do you think you spend, if you're doing a sequel to a movie with "the" in the title, how much time do you think you spend deciding, are you going to drop "the" from the sequel title? Because, you've got the Terminator route, where Terminator 2, 3, etc., there's no "the." But then you've got the Hangover route, where they did stick with the. I just feel like this has to be a very important discussion that happens in studio offices every day. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. I was a big fan of The Black Phone. I thought it had a great mood. I thought it made the most of its period piece setting in the 1970s. Really great killer, obviously, with the grabber. He was instantly iconic with all those awesome masks. So, very intrigued to see them make this sequel. Also curious how they would do it. And I really like what they've done here as far as really mixing things up. It continues with, pretty much every character you could continue with who survived the first movie. Even some people who didn't survive the first movie come back, some of the actors, but they're also not repeating themselves. And they are going in a new direction here, yet still sticking to the same characters and the same villain. This picks up a few years after the first film. They kind of have to acknowledge the fact that their main kids have gotten older, which they do. So you've got Mason Thames back as Finn, don't call him Finney anymore, and you've got Madeline McGraw returning as his younger sister, Gwen, trying to move on with their lives, but not having a great go of it because there's some trauma to deal with. Yes, this is a horror movie that deals with the trauma of what came before, but there's a lot of ways this movie manages to make things work that might otherwise feel cliche. And one of the ways I think that is that these characters are so young. And so the fact that this has stuck with Finn, the fact that Finn was a kid who got kidnapped and stuck in this basement and nearly murdered and had to kill the guy trying to kill him. Yeah, I believe that that would stick with someone. And as a high school kid, this would be something that he was really carrying around. And he's dealing with all this, but guess what? The grabber is back. He is back as a supernatural character now because he was human, he died, and now this is his new form, which is on one hand a pretty big swing to make, and yet on the other hand really fits this series. It's not like the first movie had no supernatural elements. No, the grabber wasn't a supernatural killer, he was a human killer, but this was a movie that established from the get-go that Gwen had psychic powers and that the dead could speak to people, that they were helping Finn, that they were talking to him, communicating to him through the black phone, and that this was really happening. So the fact that this killer, the grabber, is now making this shift into the supernatural, yeah, it's different, but it also doesn't feel like it's just out of left field, like, oh, this just doesn't even make sense with what was established. It actually very much makes sense with what was established, and I really like that. And a simple yet highly effective change they make this time out is that this movie is set deep in the middle of winter. It is almost all set in the snow. Most of the story is set at a Christian camp that Finn and Gwen go to because they're basically trying to investigate what is going on, why the grabber is plaguing them again, these visions that Gwen is getting. Brings them to this camp. Then they get stuck there, of course, and it just has such a cool atmosphere. No pun intended on cool, but horror movies in the snow, we don't get a lot of them, and when we do, it almost always adds a lot, and it very much does here. This movie is just so immersed in the middle of these blizzards, and they are just surrounded by ice and snow. And if you've seen in the trailers, the grabber, he gets some ice skates on at one point, which is both like insane but also awesome. And certainly makes him stand out from other killers. Yeah, I really think that they make the most of this wintry setting, and I really, really dug that about the movie. Returning director Scott Derrickson and him and his co-screenwriter C. Robert Cargill clearly have great affection for Finn and Gwen, and I really think that helps make the audience have great affection for them. I already really liked these characters from the first movie. I already really like these young performers, and getting to see them a little older here and to see how they have matured both as the characters but also off screen, the actors getting to be more mature and show these characters growth. That all really clicks. And I think Thames and McGraw just have a really great on screen rapport as brother and sister. And you really do connect to them as brother and sister and root for them and want them to get through this terrible situation. The grabber is targeting Gwen here in his revenge against Finn. Much more than the first movie, I feel like Gwen is a legitimate co-lead. I mean, she was a very important character in the first one, but this time, sometimes she's actually even the more prominent character because so much of the time is spent with her and the nightmares she's having. And I think McGraw is excellent, but Thames is great too because the two of them are going through this thing together. And sometimes she's seeing things he can't, but he's working so hard to try to help his sister. It's pretty much impossible to watch Black Phone 2 and not think of Freddy Krueger as you watch The Grabber in this new iteration because, you had this human killer who was he was murdered and now he is back and he is haunting people in their dreams. And what he's doing to them in their dreams is physically affecting them in real life. It is very Nightmare on Elm Street, and I think it's Nightmare on Elm Street in a great way. Look, the further we get from actually having Freddy Krueger on screen, the more I will take a Freddy-esque vibe, Freddy-esque situation, as we often get here. And there are some great, very Nightmare on Elm Street moments as far as seeing what's happening to Gwen in the real world versus what she's seeing in her dream. And there's a really cool thing they do visually, which is that her dreams are in Super 8. They're shot in Super 8, which means it is incredibly grainy and jittery and off-putting and adds this whole other layer of dread to when we're seeing these dreams and to seeing the grabber in these dreams. It is just very cool looking, and I think that it really does help make those dreams feel like their own thing in this movie. And on top of that, you've got the whole camp setting, so it almost feels a little like Freddy and Jason mashed together in a way that I very much welcomed as, again, a huge fan of both those characters who have been gone from us for so long. I know Jason's coming back finally, but there's something really fun about the fact that, yeah, they're at this camp, which has a history dating back. Something terrible happened in the 1950s, so that almost feels pretty intentional about what's going on here. It's set at winter though, so we're almost getting the Friday 13th movie we never got that fans always asked for, which is, hey, what if we did one set at the winter instead? So a lot of fun little mashups there of Freddy and Jason in a movie that's taking a lot of inspiration, and Derrickson and Cargill have been very open about that there is influences here from horror movies like Curtains and The Dead Zone. It doesn't feel like it's just carbon copying these movies. It's putting in these visual references, these things where they're aware we're going to think of these things because they're steeped in horror movies and they know a lot of their audience will be too. I think it still has, its own story, its own character, so it doesn't feel like, oh, we're just repeating stuff from other movies. But I think that there is an appreciative homage going on here with some of these things, or at least this acknowledgement of the history of horror. And I really liked seeing it all blend together here into the Grabber, who is this very effective new horror movie villain. And it is a great role for Ethan Hawke. It's so different for him. Obviously, most of the time his face is covered first and foremost. He brings such an ominous tone to this. And this is a version of the Grabber that's really unleashed, not just because he no longer has to worry about the physical realm, but also because, as he sort of describes, it's like he's less than human, even as far as what's motivating him and his soul. And now he is just the darkest parts of himself. Now, all that being said, while I really did enjoy Black Phone 2, I have a couple of notable criticisms. And one is that I would have liked some more kills. Yeah, I do think that this movie could have delivered more in that realm. He just wanted sort of this big, memorable kill scene you don't really get. And I think that they could have delivered for sure. And my other criticism is that while there is this very earned affection and empathy for these characters and their plight and what they're going through, there are some moments where it gets a little too sappy as far as what's happening. The amount of sort of sentiment on screen, I think, could have been dialed back a notch because I feel like we get enough. We get enough through the performances. We get enough through going through this story with these characters and what they mean to each other. And sometimes things are maybe articulated a little too directly and get a little cheesy. I was willing to overlook it though because I still did really like these characters. I think I wouldn't have forgiven it if I didn't care about them. Most of the story focuses on a pretty small group of characters who are with Finn and Gwen at this camp. There's a couple I think could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but though I did like Damien Bashir quite a bit as the owner of the camp. And I appreciated the casting of Miguel Mara, who plays Ernesto, a potential love interest for Gwen. He's a classmate of Finn and Gwen's. Michael Mora was in the first movie. He played Robin, one of Finn's classmates and a friend of his who became one of the Grabber's victims and was one of the spirits talking to Finn. And here he plays that character's younger brother. He's completely unrecognizable from the first movie, so it can read as a legitimately different character, but of course the fact that they are brothers that also has this deep connection back to the first movie. And again, I think that's something that Black Phone 2 does very well, which is it is continuing the story from the first film while also allowing it to have this very different feel, very different vibe. So everything that happened in the first movie is important to this movie, but it also doesn't feel like, oh, we're just going through the same motions again. I don't think Black Phone 2 is as scary or creepy as the first movie. That movie had an intensity to it that I don't think this one recaptures. What Finn was going through, his plight was so disturbing, and just you were so terrified for him getting caught whenever he was trying to escape, and they don't have that kind of moment here. This feels more dreamlike. It has a lot of dreams in it, and it feels like, a campfire tale being told more. Ultimately, I would give the edge to the Black Phone as far as which is the stronger movie overall, the one that I thought was the most satisfying. I mean, this is a sequel, so by its nature, it can't feel as original, but also this movie is designed almost to feel like this coda, or like this real follow-up in a different way than I think most sequels do, because it is so immersed in what's happening with the mindset of these kids. And this movie doesn't have like an obvious setup for a third movie, but the first one didn't have an obvious setup for a second movie. And I think that's totally fine. If they do a third one, they'll figure it out, and I'd welcome it. I think, again, that the Grabber is now a distinct, interesting horror icon himself. And I'd be happy to see him in another new environment. I don't know if you want to send the Grabber to Hawaii, but something different, So find something else now that they've done these two different settings so far. But if we don't get more, that's fine too. These are two strong horror movies that did their own thing, that have introduced these two young actors into burgeoning careers, and have given Ethan Hawke, a veteran actor, this really different kind of iconic role that he can really sink his teeth into. So yeah, I had a really good time with Black Phone 2, which is hitting theaters nationwide this coming weekend. If you can like and subscribe, that would be terrific. Thanks. Take care.